Thank you for joining us on The Skeptic Sidekick, where we delve into ancient societies, the ghosts, the paranormal, UFOs, all looking at it from the perspective of the true believer and from the skeptic perspective. Joining me, my partner, my co-host, my sibling, Kimber Rodriguez. Myself, I am Richard Gregg. And again, let's look into being the skeptic sidekick. Hello, and thank you for joining us for the skeptic sidekick. I am your host, and with me is my wonderful, talented, fairly intelligent than me, my sibling slash sister, because she doesn't like me calling by her favorite sibling, Kimber Rodriguez.
Hello.
How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you this evening?
I'm doing great. Now, we were actually going to have a real, actual guest on here, but it's not meant to be right now. So we decided to go ahead and talk about our favorite town in the whole wide world. Most people talk about these 6 places. What city are we talking about today?
We are talking about our hometown, the best city in the entire world, known as the River City, San Antonio, Texas. So yes, we are talking about our hometown, San Antonio, tonight. It'll be the first in a series of episodes that we do about the haunted United States. So sit back, relax, and enjoy as we tell some stories of our hometown, San Antonio, Texas.
And you're interested, pop open a cold one, preferably maybe a Long Star, but we don't both drink, so we're just going to pop open a nice, cool, either a Big Red or Dr. Pepper.
I got my Dr. Pepper right here.
I don't have any Big Red. Anyway.
So, would you like to kick this off?
Actually, I'd like to do ladies first. Ooh, ladies first. Ladies first.
Well, the first place that I'd like to talk about tonight is one that I actually had a personal experience at, and that's the Emily Morgan Hotel. Now, this hotel is located in downtown San Antonio, Alamo Plaza, right next door to the Alamo. And a little bit of history about it. It was pretty much built to be haunted, as it was first a medical hospital, and it was the state-of-the-art and had its own morgue and crematorium. It was also the highest building west of the Mississippi at the time that it was built. Now, this was known to be named after a folklore heroine named Emily West. Now, Miss West seduced General Santa Anna during the Battle of San Jacinto, which is a famous battle in the Texas-Mexican War. And thanks to her efforts, that allowed the Texans to beat the Mexicans. This is one of the most haunted hotels in all of the United States. Emily was a woman of color who was born free in New Haven, Connecticut. She came down to Texas to work as an indentured servant, as many mixed-race free people were obligated to do at her time. At that time, she worked for James Morgan, and she is rumored to have been married to Morgan, hence the name, Emily Morgan. She worked as a housekeeper at the Washington Association Hotel at Morgan's Point, which is now near Houston. However, she didn't work there for long because her and some colleagues were kidnapped and taken hostage by Mexican General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. This is the same general that I spoke about a little bit ago. And he's also, a few months before, had taken down the Alamo. Now, Emily also worked as a spy for the Texas rebels. And it is said that while Santa Anna was taking a siesta with her, we don't know if she was sleeping together, if they were just talking, but something was going on enough to keep him occupied so that the Texans could come in, being led by Sam Houston, and defeat the Mexican army in order to claim Texas as its own country at the time. Now we go back to a little bit about it being a hospital. It was known that the top floor at the time was the morgue, and the bottom floor was the crematorium. Different floors were operating floors, and so on. The building was the best hospital for decades, and it operated until 1976. Interesting, that's the year I was born. I didn't know it was a medical facility for that long. At that time, it became an office building. After 10 years, San Antonio gutted it to remodel it as a hotel. Now let's talk about the hauntings. From the time of the Battle of the Alamo to the days of the medical facility, the hotel had seen its fair share of death and bloodshed. From top to bottom, again, the most haunted floors are the basement, the 7th floor, the 12th floor, and the 14th floor. Now, a little side note. There is actually no 13th floor in the Emily Morgan. So the 14th is actually the 13th. I think it goes back to the times when 13 was considered to be very unlucky. And so many businesses would leave out a 13th floor to prevent any harm coming or any bad luck. Now, visitors have reported guests brushing up against them, lights going off and on their own, apparitions of nurses walking down hallways, floating orbs of light, and these have actually been seen by eye and captured on the hotel security cameras. Now, the basement, which was a crematorium and the morgue, so it's definitely the creepiest part, as hundreds of bodies were cremated over the medical facility's life. There are definitely some restless spirits lingering. Only the employees can enter the basement, and most have the unfortunate pleasure of having a task in the basement and dread going there. Staff is reported to seeing glowing orbs floating around and hearing voices, some yelling in pain. The worst part, the smell of burning flesh mixed with a thick, humid air, which makes most people who go down there nauseous upon entry. Some say the 7th floor is the most haunted, as this was where they did a lot of operations. Also, there has been seen a ghost bride, yet nobody knows what her connection to the hotel might be, just that she's stuck there. And she has been known to send guests flying to the lobby in the middle of the night. They may be woken up by a blood-curdling scream at 3 a.m., and others have seen her apparition in the rooms at random, only to disappear through walls. The worst part is when a guest is looking in the mirror and sees her reflection, only to turn around and see nothing there. Now, the 12th floor, this is the floor I stayed on, was where the operating rooms were located. It is rumored that guests will hear hospital stretchers being moved up and down the hallway at night. It is also said guests will see apparitions of nurses and doctors still doing their job. Guests have also reported lights in the bathroom and faucets turning off and on, and some have even seen their doors open and close randomly as a phantom walked in their room. Now, when I stayed there on the 12th floor, I did hear a lot of rustling in the middle of the night. This was around 2, 3 in the morning when most people should be asleep, but there was a lot of racket going through the halls at that time. So who knows? Maybe these were the medical staff rushing to get their patient to the operating room. Also, it has the most luxurious suites on the 14th floor, yet guests say they smell the odor of medicine and ointment, which makes sense since this was once the surgical areas. Some guests claim that they see scenes of an old hospital out of the corner of their eye, only to vanish when they glance over. One more thing about the Emily Morgan is on the 3rd floor roof, they actually have their swimming pool. The swimming pool is rumored to be made from the metal slabs that the patients were housed on or wheeled down to the morgue on. My biggest experience when I stayed at this hotel was when my husband and I decided to go swimming at that pool, unbeknownst to us that it used to be slabs. We were the only ones there, and it was our honeymoon. We were just there enjoying our time alone in the pool when the wind picked up. And mind you, this is South Texas in August. The hottest time of the year. Had to be at least 100 and something outside. We were freezing cold. We decided it was time to get up and go inside as the wind blew around us. So we got in, we went and changed for dinner and rode the elevator down. And when we stepped out of the hotel onto the street to head for dinner, the air was hot as it should be in South Texas. So we were both kind of puzzled as to what had just happened and why the change in temperature so fast. Speaking of the elevator, it is known also to land on the floors that it wasn't supposed to. Also running on its own, doors opening on their own, and so on. So there you have it, the Emily Morgan in San Antonio, one of my favorite haunts and one of the experiences that I had while visiting this famous hotel.
All right.
Any comments?
So, what are the ghosts that usually are seen there?
Well, as I mentioned, there's the bride, also doctors, nurses, and then they hear the screams, smell the burnt flesh, hear the voices, and so on.
How far is it from the Alamo?
As I said in the beginning, right next door. You can actually look out the window and look down upon the Alamo. So, Richard, what is your first story tonight?
I'd like to talk about Victoria's Black Swan Inn, located in a beautiful city. Not only is it a bed and breakfast / inn, it's also been known to be a site of ghosts. The land itself has been dated back to being significant for Native American encampments. They've shown that archaeologists have evidence of signs of a sweat lodge, housing, including a burial ground, is thought to be underneath the house itself. One of the most interesting notes is that on September 18th, 1842, General Adrian Wool, Sam Houston, and his men went against 60 Mexican soldiers during the battle of what was called the Battle of Salado. Their bodies pretty much were left to rot where they fell, and only one Texan soldier had lost his life. In 1936, the property was designated as the Battle of Alamo Historical Site by the state of Texas during the centennial celebration. Now, after the Civil War, Sebastian L. Rippenstein and his wife Henrique, aka Betsy Ackerman, settled in the land in 1867. They built a stone house barn and milking barn on the property. Their children Gustav, Henrietta, Bertha, Doritha, Ida, and Alberta Rippenstein were born in that house. Gustav is to believe one of the three spirits that haunt the dairy barn. He's been seen to be head, arms, and what looks like to be wearing a tank top and looks at people through the window when they've used thermal imaging cameras. He also makes a lot of loud noises, and his father is rumored to be also haunting that house, the little milk barn, who has been aggressive towards women, but also does not like men. An EVP had been captured of a deep voice yelling, "Get out!" And there's also seen to be a child, maybe of the next group of people by the name of Heinrich Melia and his wife Marie Berneman. They bought the house in 1887. They built the first house on the property with their children Samuel, Louisa, Sarah, aka Susie, and Daniel. The Maliers had run the dairy farm until mid-1930s. Now, Sarah has also been seen in a little milk bar. She likes to play and jump on mattresses and hang out around the milk barn. She's been known to also play pranks on people. We also go into Catherine Jolene Holbrook and Joseph Younger Holbrook. along with Mary Blanchard Jolene Woods and Clark B. Woods. The sisters called it White Gables. They conducted extensive remodeling and adding 2 wings to enlarge the mansion. Sidekick has also identified Mrs. Woods, Jolene's mother, living in the south wing of bedrooms. The next people that bought it were the attorney, Hal Park Street Jr., and his wife, Jolene Woods Street. They inherited from Jolene's mother, Claude Woods, who had bought it with her sister, Catherine. Interesting to note, before I go any further, Paul Park was known to have the gentleman by the name of Earl Stanley Gardner. You may realize who Earl Stanley Gardner is if you've ever watched Perry Mason. He's the creator and writer of several of the famous novels, as well as wrote a few of the TV shows while living there for a time at their home. Now, Mrs. Street died of cancer at a very young age. She died of breast cancer in 1959. Later in 1965, Park Jr. was found dead, hung by his neck with his hands tied behind his back. The death itself was ruled a homicide, but some psychic researchers have believed that he was actually murdered, and it was covered up to look like a suicide. He's also haunts the South Wing, which they believe might be guarding some type of treasure. Jolene also has been haunting the place, looking for one another pretty much. Next one is the George N. Mirren. She renamed it the Mirren House, which she built on to host dinners, conferences, and receptions. In 1980, the Mirrens sold the property to E. Funner Schmidt, and then Mr. Schmidt bought it to Sunbelt Self-Storage in 1987. Sunbelt Self-Storage sold the property to the current owner, who still owns it today. She named it the Victorian Black Swan after one of William Shakespeare's favorite pubs. She holds a private residence as well as a bed and breakfast mini hotel. She puts on events, which she actually still reports to this day, a little girl being pinched and boy ghosts, as well as the ghosts that I've mentioned. I'll leave the links up if you would like to actually have a stay at this wonderful little inn. She does have weddings and events, does do paranormal investigations, and the latest one, it looks like she's actually has a 1920s themed cabaret. So that's basically the Black Swan Inn.
So when you say about the girl being pinched, you mean that the girl was pinched by a ghost, or was it a ghost girl going around pinching people?
A ghost girl going around pinching people.
Interesting.
Yes.
It is a very beautiful home, now hotel. Very Victorian-like. Something I really enjoy is the Victorian era, the architecture and the clothing and stuff. So as Richard mentioned, there will be a link up so that you can see the beauty of this hotel, as well as if you'd like to stay there, you can see if they have any openings for whenever you're in San Antonio.
Right. Like I said, it's more of a little bed and breakfast type of inn, So give them a call and see what they can do.
Now, sticking on the theme of hotels at this moment, the next place I'd like to talk about is the Manger Hotel. Now, the Manger Hotel sits in Alamo Plaza today, but in 1836, it was part of the grounds of the Battle of Alamo. So there was a lot of death and war on the grounds to start with. By the 1940s, Manifest Destiny had begun. Now, for you history buffs out there, you know that this was a time that many people from the East started migrating towards the West. During that time, William A. Manger felt his calling in the West because he arrived in San Antonio during this time. And it was still pretty much a cattle town. Think of horses, tumbleweeds, the old saloon. That's what it was like when Mr. Manger moved to San Antonio. And speaking of saloons, he decided to start the Western Brewery. And it was not only the first brewery in Texas, but by 1878, it had been the largest operating brewery in the Lone Star State. Now, just on the other side of the brewery was a boarding house owned by Mary Gwenther, spelled Guenther. I apologize if I had mispronounced that. And this was one of the first people that William had met when he moved to San Antonio while he was looking for job opportunities. After a while, he convinced her to marry him, and both businesses thrived in San Antonio. But soon enough, it was necessary to expand the boarding house. So together they decided to make it into a grand hotel, and they named it the Manger after themselves. Many people famous have stayed at this hotel throughout the years. People such as General Robert E. Lee, Ulysses S. Grant, also the author William Sidney Porter, Oscar Wilde, and many others. A couple of the others were Teddy Roosevelt and Captain Richard King, also known as the man who started the King Ranch in South Texas. Now, a little bit about the ghosts in the hotel. The first ghost is Teddy Roosevelt himself. See, when Teddy stayed there, he used to sit at the bar and wait for men to come in and buy them a drink. Once he had them good and schnockered up or drunk, he would take them and sign them up for the Spanish-American War. It is said that to this day, Teddy can be seen sitting at the bar waiting for his next victim, or should I say, drinking buddy, to come in and join him. Sometimes he is much more vocal, however. He's been known to holler at the workers and coerce them into conversation. In other rare occurrences, the staff have actually approached a very real-looking apparition. He is said to start with his recruiting tactics as trying to rope them into joining. Another famous spirit, actually the most famous spirit of the Manger, is Sally White. She was a beloved staff member during the late 19th century. It is said that her husband, Harry Wheeler, was a jealous sort, and stories circulated that Wheeler was always jealous in any attention given to his wife. That jealousy sparked many arguments, some of them even transpiring at the place of work, the Menger. On March 28th of 1876, his jealousy would take a deadly turn. On the evening before, Harry and Sally had one of their rows, and it escalated quickly. Wheeler wheeled around on Sally, closing in. He was so mad at her that he threatened to kill her. Panicked by this, Sally ran from her husband to the local police station, where she begged officers to help her. They did agree and allowed her to stay at the courthouse for the remainder of the night. However, an investigation of Wheeler himself showed no signs of any weapons in the house, and that left officers without any leverage to arrest him. So early the next morning, Sally returned to her house to gather some items before heading to work. He had been waiting for her with a fully loaded pistol. She ran from their home once again back to the Menger Hotel where she could find safety. But he followed her. And when he caught up, he closed his hand around her throat and shot her. He shot her once in the lower abdomen, and when she squirmed out of his grasp, he fired and shot her again, just left to the spine. She died 2 days later on the 3rd floor of the original part of the hotel. Today, Sally's ghost is still seen very often within the hotel, especially on the 3rd floor where she died over 100 years ago. It seems even in death, she enjoys her work for the Menger. She is often seen clutching an armful of towels and sheets to her chest. She's been known to be seen walking through doors or walls as though a barrier posed no problem, and her hands were always full of the sheets and towels. Another occasion, the guest had just gotten out of the shower and saw Sally standing at the edge of the bed. Shocked, she ran down the stairs to the front desk and told the concierge everything that she had seen. Now, as I mentioned before, Captain Richard King was also known to stay at the hotel. In fact, that was his favorite place to stay whenever he came to San Antonio. And he stayed so often that he actually had his own private suite on the second floor, known today as the King Room. A month before he passed, he came and stayed at the hotel until the day of his death. At this place, he wrote his will, and as I mentioned before, he passed in the room. However, he was not about to let death be the reason he was removed from the hotel, as many times he has seen in the Manger, especially in his old private suite. I'm sorry, it's known as the King Ranch Suite. And you can stay in it if you have the guts next time you're in San Antonio. There have been several reports in this suite. A sense of being watched is one of them. A woman sleeping awoke to glance at the foot of her bed and see an apparition of Captain King watching her. Others claim to have heard heavy footsteps about the room, also hearing shutters on the window open and close by an unseen force. He has been known to be seen roaming the hallways on the second floor and disappearing through doorways. Also, the strangest thing is a dancing red orb that has only appeared in King's suite or just outside of it. What is the cause of this orb is unknown. Perhaps it's a signal that Captain Richard is closer than anyone realizes. In 1890, an insurance agent showed up at the Manger. He entered the bar room and went up to the bar. This man was known as H.H. Childers. He removed his gun from its holster, raised his arm, aimed, fired, and killed Jim Draper, who was a hack driver.
Now, what's a hack driver?
That is a good question. What is a hack driver? Let's see. A hack driver is...
Did he drive the horses around?
He was actually a taxi driver.
But it's 1890s.
Yes.
So
it was probably a horse and buggy at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So basically a hack driver is someone who drives someone around.
I'm sorry, please continue.
No problem. Now, why Childers killed this driver, nobody knows. Also, in 1903, a mail clerk was visiting San Antonio. Originally, he was from Kentucky, and at the age of 26 was already quite ill. He was told that San Antonio might offer him just what he needed, so he made the move. One night on September 7th, 1903, after not getting any better, he went to his room, took a knife, and committed suicide by cutting his throat. The Menger Hotel has seen many deaths either by murder, suicide, or war, and this has only increased the paranormal activity. Unsuspecting guests can see ghosts of these souls as they replay the last moments of their lives before onlookers. Now, if you'd like to see some of these ghosts or experience any of these hauntings, I will leave a link to the hotel where you can see about renting a room for the night. I can't guarantee that you'll get much sleep, though, while you're there.
All right. Interesting that you would talk about Teddy Roosevelt. The site where Joe and Harry Freeman Colosseum was built in 1949 was actually used as a training center for those Rough Riders after Teddy Roosevelt convinced them to join. Now, Joe and Harry were a couple of philanthropists. They were philanthropists. I can't not say the words. They were good doers who made their fortune in Texas cotton, oil, and ranch, as well as Chevrolet dealerships. Because of their outdoorsy life, they decided they wanted to construct a coliseum in San Antonio, which they broke ground and opened to public in 1949. The first ever San Antonio stock show and rodeo was established there. Now, no one knows why there's a few ghosts there. a woman who was trampled by a bull during an accident in the 50s, as well as a cackling rodeo clown that was left over there from the circus and actually had been subjugated by a group of ghost hunters. I believe, let me see if I can, I'm sorry. It had everything set up, and then all of a sudden, once it comes down to it, it laughs its heads off.
Maybe the spirits are working against us.
Maybe. But yeah, there's hidden tunnels underneath there. There's a lot of legends of bloody ghost babies found on the floors due to satanic rituals.
Oh my goodness.
Ghost of a woman who was trampled to death at a bull riding event, and even a cackling laughter coming from a clown who died at the circus.
Oh my gosh. Now these babies, were these apparitions or these were actually found?
Rumor has it actually found.
Oh my gosh, that's horrible.
One of the spirits may be one of the Rough Riders that stayed around after Teddy Roosevelt went up San Juan Hill during the Spanish-American War. A group of ghost hunters actually went in there and did a few EVP readings and captured a few ghosts.
Have there been any apparitions seen here?
Yes. In fact, I will link to our website a picture courtesy of the San Antonio Express News for your reviews. That's the Joe and Harry Freeman Colosseum.
Now, have you ever had any experiences there? I know this is a place that we used to go to quite often.
I'd get lost a lot, even though it's a circular thing. And when I was a little kid, I actually had basically, I don't know if it was an officer, but just kind of set me in front of the G&H entrance to stay put. And when I looked around, he wasn't there. So
interesting. Yeah, we would go there quite a bit growing up, as that was the place of the stock show and rodeo our parents took us to every year, as well as where you graduated. And I do remember you getting lost quite frequently in that place. And I can't remember exactly where we found you, but I know it was always in the same place. So I'll take your word that it was the G&H entrance.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's pretty much Joe and Harry Freeman Colosseum. Do you got another one you want to do?
Yes. The Gunter Hotel, also located in Alamo Plaza, also was, at the time of the Battle of the Alamo, part of the grounds. In 1837, it was the Frontier Hotel, and it sat at the corner of El Rincon, Rincon. Sorry, my Spanish is not that good. And El Paseo streets. These streets have been renamed St. Mary's and Houston Avenue, which they are still to this day. Now, in 1909, it was changed to the Gunter Hotel, named after Jot Gunter, who first came up with the idea of building it. However, he passed away shortly before the completion, so he was never able to see it. It did have a lot of Hollywood celebrities stay here as well, such as Mae West, cowboy film star Tom Mix, and Roy Rogers. Also, John Wayne and Gene Autry were known to have stayed here. Other notable guests were Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman. In 1965, an unidentified murder was married at the historic hotel, and her restless spirit still haunts the premises. In 1965, a blonde man in his 20s checked into room 636. Though he checked in alone, he was soon seen over the next several days accompanied by a tall blonde who was sophisticated looking. All seemed fine until an afternoon maid went to prepare to check out the room on February 8th. There was a do not disturb sign on the door, and she thought this was an oversight, as many people tend to leave it on the door when they leave. So she took her key to unlock the door. When she entered, she was shocked to find that Mr. Knox was standing beside a blood-soaked bed. She screamed, and he put his index finger to his lips, telling her to be quiet. He then gathered up a blood-soaked bundle and ran right past her out the door. After a while, the frightened maid told another maid, who told a bellhop, and he finally told the manager. 40 minutes had passed before the police finally were called. Within 10 minutes, they arrived, and 2 detectives found the grisly scene when they entered the room. The entire room was covered in blood, from the carpet to the bathroom floor and all over the walls, the bed. Pieces of flesh were also found in the bathroom, and the police thought that the woman's body had been butchered there, with some parts disposed down the toilet. Gee, I can just imagine that plumbing.
Yes.
Within days...
We could have called Mike Rowe on that.
Right? Within a few days, the police tracked down the suspect, who checked into the St. Anthony Hotel a few blocks away. They knocked on the door, and they heard a shot from inside the room as he killed himself. He was later identified as Walter Emmerich. Though searches were made, the woman's body was never found, and they believe that he may have disposed of it in a still wet cement at one of the many construction parts that were taking place in San Antonio at the time. Since then, guests and staff have reported strange occurrences around room 636. The restless spirit has often appeared with her arms outstretched. Sounds of hammering have also been reported coming from an occupied room 636. Others have reported the image of a blonde woman appearing in photographs. Housekeeping staff have reported new employees quitting after the first time that they are assigned to clean the room. However, where there's one spirit, others seem to follow. There's also a report of an elderly woman who has been known to lurk about the hotel. The most famous spirits are that of Ingrid and Peggy. These are 2 loud but harmless spirits, and they each inhabit an opposite side of the hotel on the 2nd floor. Ingrid, with her long dark hair and white dress, and Peggy in her little short flapper attire, have been apparently seen having a bitter rivalry since their deaths, or even before. No one knows who they were in life and whether they knew each other, but now they're fond of throwing things at each other, slamming doors, and occasionally tugging guests back and forth between them. They seem to become especially active during parties. It seems that they want to join in the fun, as Ingrid in particular is known to photobomb unsuspecting guests. She will appear beside them in her pale finery. On November 23rd, 1936, Robert Johnson, a blues singer, began recording his first session of his career in room 414. The session lasted 3 days, and it included his recording of Crossroad Blues. Some have interpreted that he had an alleged deal with the devil, trading his soul for inhumane musical talent. Now, it is known in the blues world that the Crossroads is a place where many have met the devil to make such deals. Sadly, this recording was also his second to the last. 2 years later, he died at the age of 27 under suspicious circumstances. Accounts by friends and witnesses indicate that he might have been murdered with a bottle of poisoned whiskey who was given to him by an obsessed fan. Or maybe it was tampered with by a jealous husband, or even the devil himself coming to collect. Although he died 2 states away from Gunter, guests say they can hear or feel him lingering in the room where he first tasted his success. In spite of the legend of the deal with the devil, his presence described as a positive one, a muse to artists who seek him out. Many believe the song is not only about the devil at all, but a benevolent voodoo trickster god symbolized by the crossroads. If you're not lucky enough to book your stay at the room 414, you can still stop for a nightcap in the bar 414, which the hotel lounge named in honor of Johnson's visit. Now, unlike the memory of Robert Johnson and the naming of the pub after him, and the toleration of the mischievous Ingrid and Peggy, the hotel has done its best to forget what happened in room 636, remodeling and splitting the original room in two to try and shake up the restless spirit. Nevertheless, guests still see the murder scene endlessly repeating, or they see the mysterious woman simply standing near where it occurred, arms stretched out. The older woman, as I mentioned before, has also been seen in a similar pose. It is unclear whether she's a different ghost attracted to the spot of spiritual turmoil, or the woman herself lamenting her loss at a chance to live and grow old. In spite of all efforts to move on, almost a few decades after the murder, the hotel received a weathered envelope addressed to its old name and its old zip code, circa 1965. Inside was an old message, only an original key to the room 636, also from the era of the murder, just before they was switched over to key cards. Someone remembers. Now, my question is, are you up to the challenge of checking in and greeting the ghost of the Sheraton Gunster for yourself? If you are, again, I'll leave a link to where you can reserve a room.
Do you think I could?
If you like.
Well, who knows?
Yes, so that's the Gunter Hotel.
All right, so we've gone around in circles around the hotels right there. Let's talk about the real haunted place in San Antonio. I'm talking about such a wonderful place where every child in Texas knows this. Let's talk about Mission San Antonio de la Vera, a.k.a. the Alamo. 1798, a group of monks, Franciscan friars per se, set up a small chapel in a cotton grove in the compound of San Antonio de Vallejo. Setting up the mission system, they named it Mission San Antonio de la Vallejo, which later was reduced to what we call the Alamo. They had problems with plagues and Indians massacring. They basically pretty much left it abandoned, which later on, I believe 1793, they created the second flying company of San Carlos de las Pelas, which was basically a military outpost set right close to it. And then, of course, we get into the Texas Revolution. Mexican General Martin Prefecto del Cos gave up the fort to the Texian army in December of 1835, right after what they called the Siege of Beja. The locals pretty much had taken it over as a kind of a building place for the new army. Of its command was William Travis and James Bowie, who were actually colonists to there. They were Mexican citizens. Now, because of all the problems with what was going on across the border, as well as what's going on down in southern Mexico, President General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna marched into Texas, and within 13 days from February 23rd, 1836 to March 6th, 1836, the little ragtag group of 187 men, some say it was 200, managed to hold off the Mexican army. On March 6th, the Mexican army, led by Santa Anna, managed to overrun the ramparts and storm the inside of the buildings. Under this violent assault, all were slaughtered, and few managed to survive to either successfully escape or either die several months later. When the battle concluded, Santa Anna piled the bodies on each other to set them on fire. The Mexicans were incensed, but the moment they tried to go in there to actually burn the devils, the soldiers came back screaming about the fact that the bodies rose as ghosts and told them that you will not defile this sacred place. So they left. Santa Anna basically tried to burn down the bodies twice, and twice they were repelled by spirits. And one of the protecting spirits, it was on the Alamo Monument, just right outside the Alamo, which is called the cenotaph. It's become such a problem that guards and watchmen refuse to patrol the building after hours. The spirits are said to be of Davy Crockett, Travis, and of interesting of all things, because of John Wayne's fascination with the Alamo, he filmed a movie called The Alamo about the history of regions. After he died, tourists, actually back in 1977, seen his ghost talking with other spirits of the Alamo.
So,
Okay.
John Wayne,
yes,
has been hanging out at the Alamo talking with the other spirits.
That's the stories, and that's been eyewitnessed by a few of the tourists that come in there. There's also said to be a little boy that hangs out in the gift shop. His parents escaped before the Alamo was sieged, and he's been known to hang out and hide his little self among the tables and curios inside the gift shop.
Now, getting back to John Wayne being there, how do we know it's actually John Wayne and not maybe someone who also fought in the Battle for the Alamo?
Well, eyewitnesses said that they've seen John Wayne dressed in a period piece as well as his normal 20th century clothing.
Okay, now that's insane.
Anyway, if you ever get a chance to come down to San Antonio, Texas, there is a lot of historical, wonderful stories, as well as the ghost stories. And if you do get a chance to actually go to the Gunter, the Manger, the St. Anthony, these wonderful hotels that overlook what was once the grounds for the Alamo, walk down there, walk across the street, go inside, and just sit there for a brief moment and listen to the silence. Could you possibly hear the sounds of battles going on? Could you hear the natives' restless calls? Or even could you hear ordered marching going on? Because they ask you to remain silent as you go into the building. They also ask you not to take photographs or recordings or anything like that. But it's just this eerie silence that occasionally you can hear just off the distance the sounds of.
Now, these are some of the haunted places in San Antonio, but there are many, many, many others. If you'd like to hear more stories about it, let us know. If you'd like to hear more about some of the legends of the area, let us know. Who knows, we may do a spinoff of the folklore of the U.S. as well as maybe San Antonio Part 2, because there are so many places.
As we wrap up this wonderful stories, do you have any podcasts you'd like to talk about?
Let me find it. Do you have any?
Well, I do have a couple of them.
What's one?
It's called the Black Vault Radio. Most of the time, it deals with unclassified and declassified UFO projects and reports. It does occasionally have a little bit of paranormal, but mostly it's about releasing of UFO information, intel.
And who are the hosts?
The host is John Green.
Okay, and we'll leave the link in the description for that. Okay, the one I would like to talk about this week or recommend to our listeners is Graveyard Tales. Now, this is a couple of guys also from Texas. They are known as Adam and Matt, and they're from, I want to say Grapevine. Let me just double check that. Oh, I'm sorry, Grand Prairie, Texas. Now, I like them because they've got that down-home, easygoing sound. At the beginning of every episode, they have a dad joke, which is something I absolutely love, are dad jokes. So if you like a good story about the supernatural from two down-home guys from Texas, definitely check out the Graveyard Tales podcast, and I will leave a link for them as well.
Anyway, do you have anything else, or?
Just make sure to go over to Apple Podcasts and rate us. The more high ratings we get, the higher on the list we will become, and it'll be easier to find us. So please, if you enjoy the show, go over there and rate us. You can also email us if you have any questions or ideas for future shows, or if you have a story you'd like to share on air, or if you'd like to be interviewed. You can always email us at info@skepticpsychic.com, or you can also go to our website, skepticpsychic.com, and fill out the form there on our contact page. We also have a Facebook group called Skeptic Psychic. You can come hang out and talk with other fans of the show and make some new friends while you're there.
We like friends. We really do like friends.
Yes. So join us over there at Skeptic Psychic Facebook group as well. Anything else you'd like to add this week?
Yeah, I'd like to add the fact that we really do like the feedback. And actually, I got a feedback from a Lucy Zimmerman saying that the podcast is informative, and she liked that we do have a great sense of humor with it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Lucy, for that feedback. We really appreciate it. And with that, we'll say good night for this week. And
good night.
Pleasant dreams.
Unpleasant nightmares.
Either or, your choice.
Either or. Take care, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.